Good evening. I'm Teresa Skubic, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, October 31st. We begin tonight with a long overdue meeting. Prime Minister Mark Carney met with Chinese President Xi Jinping this morning, walking away with an invitation to visit China, but no progress on the trade disputes that have strained relations between the two countries. This marks the first visit by a Canadian Prime Minister to China since 2017, also the last time leaders from both countries met face to face. Before the talks began, Carney praised what he called constructive engagement between Ottawa and Beijing in recent months.
As you mentioned, our countries have a long history of cooperation, engagement, and trade. 55 years of diplomatic relations marked the anniversary 2 weeks ago. In recent years, we have not been as engaged. In fact, as you know, this is the first formal meeting between the Canadian Prime Minister and the President of the People's Republic of China for 8 years. Distance is not the way to solve problems, not the way to serve our people with people-centric growth, as you have advocated. Pragmatic and constructive engagement is, and I welcome the momentum that has been established in recent months, meetings of our officials, meetings of ministers, and the meeting that I was able to have with Premier Li in New York. I also welcome the invitation to come to China to further the dialogue, and I very much look forward to doing so, because it's through this constructive and pragmatic dialogue that we will address a path for current issues, that we will establish a road to seize the many great opportunities between our countries, and also to have the platform that's needed for the dialogue to help build a more sustainable, inclusive international system.
The two leaders spoke for about 40 minutes on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in South Korea. Despite the lack of movement on trade, the Prime Minister said he was very pleased with the outcome.
This meeting today is long overdue. It has been 8 years since a Canadian Prime Minister has met with the President of China. We now have a turning point in the relationship, a turning point that creates opportunities for Canadian families, for Canadian businesses, and Canadian workers, and also creates a path to address current issues. So very pleased with the outcome of the meeting. Our officials are instructed to work at pace on issues moving forward.
However, when pressed by reporters afterwards, the Prime Minister declined to say whether the meeting led to any progress on trade. Our contributor, David Clement, joins me now in studio to discuss the leaders' meeting. David, I want to start with where the relationship between Canada and China soured. What happened there?
Yeah, so it's a long list. It includes Hong Kong and the national security law, essentially China betraying the original agreement with the British when Hong Kong was given to the Chinese. It had been a long-standing tradition that it was one country but two rules. Hong Kong was the freest place in the world until the national security law. You have accusations of foreign interference. Those are kind of long-winded, and I think most Canadians generally understand the lay of the land there. But we also have instances of Chinese nationals accused of being spies and working in things like the lab in Winnipeg. We have the Uyghur genocide, right? The rounding up of an ethnic minority put into what the Chinese call re-education camps, which sounds like it's from George Orwell's 1984. And you have the Huawei Meng affair when we arrested and detained the Huawei executive on behalf of the Americans. And in response, China took the two Michaels and imprisoned them for over 1,000 days. So it's a really long list. Even more recently, Canadians in China who were arrested on alleged drug charges, who were then sentenced to death. Where the relationship fell apart is just a laundry list of issues, mostly on behalf of the Chinese.
And those are some pretty serious issues, but I think that creates the question of, should Canada be doing trade with China?
I think it depends on national security issues or instances that have national security implications. I think the answer is no. Should Huawei be in our 5G network? No. Should TikTok be on government devices? No. When we're talking about durable goods, I think that that's a different story. I think we can have a prosperous trading relationship with China. I'm not a fan of cutting off Canada from China entirely, primarily for one reason. It's not the average Chinese citizen's fault that they live under an authoritarian dictatorship. And so completely shutting off Canada from Chinese goods, especially durable goods, I think would be punishment for choices that they aren't making, and it would make Canadians much poorer.
Now, on the topic of trade negotiations, what were some of the major issues going into today's meeting?
So we have Chinese tariffs on Canadian pork, more importantly, Canadian canola. And then the big issue on the other end is Canadian tariffs on Chinese EVs, which are still in place.
And just how big of a deal is the Chinese market for Canada's canola farmers?
Massive. So total canola exports between 2020 and 2025 are anywhere upwards of 15 to $20 billion. And in 2024, 67% of canola seed exports went to China alone. So they were the largest buyer, beating out everyone by an exponential amount. What the issue here is that the counter tariff response from the Chinese on canola in response to our Chinese tariffs is projected to reduce Canadian exports to China by 20 to 30% for 2025. So we're talking a significant hit from the largest market in which we export canola seed to. So it's on canola, it's massive. And yes, there are options to try and find other markets for canola, but it's very difficult when so much of it was so concentrated in one market.
And you mentioned Canada's EV tariffs on Chinese EVs. Just how large is that tariff, and is there justification for them?
So it's 100% tariff. And the main issues here is first, climate goals, right? We have these ambitious climate goals still. We have a pause on the EV mandate, but you can't have those climate goals and have tariffs on Chinese EVs, primarily because in order for consumers to be able to afford electric vehicles, they have to be cheaper. And the only EVs on the market right now that are even remotely close to your standard gas sedan are companies like BYD out of China. So if you want to meet your climate goals and you are going to hold on to any type of EV mandate, you can't also price the lower priced EVs out of the market with tariffs. And the other major issue is we're stuck in between a rock and a hard place, because domestically, the auto industry loves the tariffs on Chinese EVs because they don't have to compete. But the real issue here is whether or not we want to mirror US tariffs, because the Trump administration wanted us to mirror their tariffs on Chinese EVs to protect the auto industry. Well, it's really put us in a rock and a hard place, because do you want to meet your climate goals? Do you want to have access to cheaper EVs? Do we want to try and navigate through really hurting a huge industry in Manitoba and Saskatchewan in terms of canola to match the US efforts on Chinese EVs? That's really the crux of the issue right now.
And right now, it really seems like Mark Carney is doing a bit of a balancing act. He's trying to manage the Canada-US best relations and also the Chinese relations and best interest. How would he manage walking this tightrope?
I think he needs to break from the US on this one. First, because consumers need to be able to afford EVs to buy them. Second, trying to match US policy is essentially a game where any morning Trump could wake up and change his mind on his own tariffs. And so trying to match US policy means that it can change with the stroke of a pen. It can change based on his mood in the afternoon. Three, I think the argument that Chinese EVs are a national security issue is false. It falls into the category of durable good, not something like access to our 5G network, not something like TikTok on government devices. So it's fundamentally different. And at the end of the day, the response from the Chinese makes the tariffs on Chinese EVs not worth it. When you factor in the immense cost that this has on Canadian farmers, canola, pork. So at the end of the day, I think this is a scenario where we have to break from following the Trump administration's lead and go our own way, just so that we can salvage the trading relationship with China where it matters most, which is in those durable goods, commodities, food, EVs, and things like that.
David, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you.